Well, hello there, you beautiful, beautiful people. I hope you're all well. How are you doing? And, well, hello there. I could push it a little bit further and say, look, remember, y'all are my babies. But anyway, enough of that. Straight into the meat and potatoes, as I would like to talk about Dave. I have obviously spoken briefly on some of the interviews that Dave has done. I did some videos yesterday that went through some of the questions he was asked and his responses to such. And, you know, I've had time now. I've had a few hours to go between the two interviews that he did. And I can pretty much say that the interview he did over on the Drunk Turkey show was pretty much a pointless waste of time. No point in doing that whatsoever. There was nothing to be gained from watching that. The only thing it did for me, if anything, was to kind of say, look, someone could have gone into this house and potentially they would have struggled to locate certain rooms, certain people, if they were unfamiliar with that property. But people quite rightly said, well, hold on a second, if someone was kind of doing reconnaissance on that property, whether it be online and looking at internal pictures of where the layouts, you know, were on the 3 levels, and they were round the back and they could see in through the windows and potentially see who was in these, they might have been able to work out what room was what. And I get all that. So look, it is a possibility that someone who was doing enough reconnaissance could have walked in there, even in the dark, and known pretty much there or thereabouts. It's arguable. But that is all that I kind of got from it. What I found very interesting in Dave is his timing. His timing in terms of when he came out and decided that he wanted to speak. Now, the claims were that he wanted to come out and speak because his friend had lost his life, sadly, due to being supplied or potentially supplied narcotics by Emma Bailey and Demetrius Robinson. And he kind of wanted to set the record straight, so to speak. And I thought to myself, but you haven't really set anything straight. You haven't really set anything straight whatsoever. There's been nothing set straight. You know, for someone who, by his own admission, he does not watch, he doesn't get involved in true crime, he doesn't watch the stuff online, he has no interest in it, he's interested in the typical guy stuff. I then struggle to think, well, if that's the case, if you have no interest in it whatsoever, you don't watch it, none of your friends watch it, why would you choose social media and these specific channels to go on and have these discussions? And that's what I struggle with. I struggle to find a motive that's viable that explains that, and then come out with the information that he comes out with. You know, we already knew that it was said that Bryan Kohberger had returned to the Moscow, Idaho area the following morning after these murders. That's what we was told. Now, he tells us, and that story sort of changed from one interview to the other, regarding who actually went out to recollect whatever they'd dropped after being stopped by the police, so on and so forth, and that they'd seen Bryan Kohberger. It would also go on to say that the description of Bryan Kohberger was potentially a discussion just before the interview to recount what had been said. And I think to myself, in this situation where people who you know, you're familiar with, you're social friends with, and this happens, you would know every detail. You wouldn't need to go back to someone and have a discussion about it. You wouldn't forget things that he claimed to have forgotten about. You know, we talk about the house, and it was very, very clear, and I'm going to call this shit out right now, Dave, that when you was asked specifically about the narcotics sort of situation at 1122 King Road, you dodged that. You didn't flat out want to say no comment because you fucking knew that would look bad. So you had to say something, but you didn't say anything at the same time. Where in an earlier conversation, you had pointed the finger quite heavily at Xana. And look, I'm going to put this out there right now, and that is that whatever happened at this house, whoever did it, there was a reason that it happened. I don't believe it was random. Even the police very early on turned around and said that this was a targeted attack. And I think they slipped up. I think they slipped up by telling people it was targeted, because then they have to fucking explain themselves. They have to say, well, why do you think it was targeted then? Why was this house targeted? And I believe that they, even at the beginning of all this, potentially knew that that place was targeted because of the activity that was going on within it. Now, the fact of the matter is I don't believe that the college or law enforcement want that to come out. So now they're on stony ground, because they have to, on one hand, try to convict Bryan Kohberger, but they don't want to throw the victims and the surviving members of 1122 King Road under the bus. And that is going to be a juggling session. And I believe that that is potentially why we've seen such a huge document drop and said, there you go, there's absolutely everything. Rather than saying, there's that piece of evidence, that's what we're going to use, there's that bit. And I'm going over that in a separate video later, so I won't dig into that because I'll make this video too long. So watch out for video 2. We'll touch on that later. But this is about Dave. Now, could it be that Dave came out because the media started getting hold of the Demetrius and Emma story and started talking about it? And whereas Dave has turned around and said, well, I don't really watch true crime, I'm not interested in it. Not interested in it at all. But you fucking were, Dave, weren't you? Because you was watching it. You was watching it enough to see the direction that things were heading, and then jump on and start talking to channels that you believed were influential because they were talking about these. Now, Daniel over at the Drunk Turkey Show, for instance, I believe is a firm believer that Bryan Kohberger is the person who did it. He's the one. So is that why Dave chose that channel to go on? Not somebody who potentially doubted Bryan Kohberger and had indeed spoken about narcotics, spoken about potential nefarious stuff that was going on at 1122 King Road. So he wouldn't have wanted to have got into a conversation with someone with that mindset because the questions would have been too difficult to answer. Now, I would turn around and challenge Dave and say, I've got some questions that I would like to ask you. If you would like to contact me, my email is in video descriptions. Reach out and I'll ask you some questions and see whether you can answer them. They're going to be very, very to the point and direct, I'll warn you. But I would want to know, full stop, whether they were dealing out of that house. And to what extent were they dealing out of that house? And were they supplying people with narcotics from that house over at Washington State University? We already have a situation where this Emma and Demetrius, who are connected to this property, especially Emma being connected to this property, haven't been seen at parties. And this guy who's come on, Dave, and had a conversation, who he himself claims that he has been to this house, to his connection to it. So, in a roundabout way, he is connected to Emma, because the likelihood is they were all at parties together. And all of a sudden we have this being pushed online, this recent stuff. We definitely saw Kohberger the following day. My friend said it. He probably wouldn't come on and have a conversation about it himself. Of course he fucking wouldn't. But that whole situation stinks. The whole situation stinks. Yes, Dave spoke about the 8-hour gap. And he did clarify that this was being spoken about. And he claims that he just thought that that was the general knowledge of people out there, that they knew this was known about earlier. Really? That's what you're going with. You thought that everybody knew that these murders happened, and then several hours later, 911 was called. What made you think that everybody knew that story? Because that makes no sense whatsoever. What part of that do you not understand through the narrative that you must have seen if you was looking at channels like Drunk Turkey Show, Truth and Transparency, so on and so forth? Something don't sit right still. And even though, like yesterday, I said I feel Brian Koberger's got a connection to 1122 King Road. And I damn well do believe that he had a connection at 1122 King Road. I believe that this entire situation was caused by narcotics. I believe that this has got a narcotics background, and that is your causation. And I believe, like I said at the beginning of this video, the law enforcement now have a very, very difficult situation to navigate. Because Moscow has, and I'm not saying Moscow alone, I'm not saying that Moscow, Idaho are the only people who have this problem. It's a problem everywhere. But that university being government funded, they are not going to want the press and the people who they get funding from to know that they have a massive issue, especially if it turns out that certain people are taking backhanders to turn a blind eye. Now, did Brian Koberger commit these murders? I don't know. Do I believe that he was involved in these murders? I don't know. Could he have just been some idiot who was in the wrong place at the wrong time? He was someone who went there, got stuff, and that's, again, what he was speaking about with regards to Bethany Funk and the exculpatory evidence. Go and ask her. She knows. I kept coming over to her. They were supplying me drugs, and I kept going there to get them. That knife sheath, or the knife, whatever, I left it there one night. I left it. I used to carry it for protection, and I left it there. I used it to pay for something, or held it as a deposit until I went back and paid. There's many, many things. All he has to turn around and say is, they were supplying me narcotics. That's why I was going backwards and forwards there. That night, I was going over there for my normal trip over there to grab what I used to grab. Because when you compare this night to what we learn about his trips over there and when they were and what times they were, this looks like it was just another one of these 12 trips. Now, it could be argued either way, but that ain't enough to get him the firing squad. We've heard that they're going to drop the knife sheath because they don't want to explain about the genealogy situation, because they know that's going to be argued to death. So let's get rid of that. Don't need it. So what do they know? What, that he might have been looking at the girls he was buying drugs from on Instagram, and they're going to turn it into he stalked them. I'm telling you now, all he has got to do is turn around and say, I'm a narcotics user, that's where I was getting them from. And I feel the rest is history. Let me know down below what you think. What do you think of Dave? And Dave, I dare you, reach out to me. I'll catch you all in the next one.